Book 4. Proem. I wander afield, thriving in sturdy thought, through unpathed haunts of the pure-eyeds, trodden by step of none before. I joy to come on undefiled fountains there, to drain them deep. I joy to pluck new flowers, to seek for this my head a signal crown, from regions where the Muses never yet have garlanded the temples of a man. First, since I teach concerning mighty things, and go right on to loose from round the mind the tightened coils of dread religion. Next, since, concerning themes so dark, I frame songs so pellucid, touching all throughout, even with the Muses' charm which, as 'twould seem, is not without a reasonable ground. For as physicians, when they seek to give young boys the nauseous wormwood, first do touch the brim around the cup with the sweet juice and yellow of the honey, in order that the thoughtless age of boyhood be cajoled as far as the lips, and meanwhile swallow down the wormwood's bitter draught, and, though befooled, be yet not merely duped, but rather thus grow strong again with recreated health. So now I too, since this my doctrine seems in general somewhat woeful unto those who've had it not in hand, and since the crowd starts back from it in horror, have desired to expound our doctrine unto thee in song, soft speaking and Pyrian, and, as 'twere, to touch it with sweet honey of the Muse. If by such method haply I might hold the mind of thee upon these lines of ours, till thou dost learn the nature of all things, and understandest their utility, existence and character of the images. But since I've taught already of what sort the seeds of all things are, and how distinct in divers forms they flit of own accord, stirred with emotion everlasting on, and in what mode things be from them create, and since I've taught what the mind's nature is, and of what things 'tis with the body knit, and thrives in strength, and by what mode uptorn that mind returns to its primordials, now will I undertake an argument, one for these matters of supreme concern, that there exist those somewhats which we call the images of things. These, like to films scaled off the utmost outside of the things, flit hither and thither through the atmosphere, and the same terrify our intellects, coming upon us waking or in sleep, when oft we peer at wonderful strange shapes and images of people born of light, which oft have horribly roused us when we lay in slumber, that haply nevermore may we suppose that souls get loose from Acheron, or shades go floating in among the living, or aught of us is left behind at death, when body and mind, destroyed together, each back to its own primordials goes away. And thus I say that effigies of things and tenuous shapes from off the things are sent from off the utmost outside of the things, which are like films or may be named a rind, because the image bears like look and form with whatso body has shed it fluttering forth. A fact thou mayst, however dull thy wits, well learn from this, mainly, because we see even mongst visible objects many be that send forth bodies, loosely some diffused, like smoke from oaken logs and heat from fires, and some more interwoven and condensed, as when the locusts in the summertime put off their glossy tunics, or when calves at birth drop membranes from their body's surface. Or when, again, the slippery serpent doffs its vestments mongst the thorns, for oft we see the briars augmented with their flying spoils. Since such takes place, 'tis likewise certain too, that tenuous images from things are sent, from off the utmost outside of the things. For why those kinds should drop and part from things, rather than others tenuous and thin, no power has man to open mouth to tell, especially, since on outsides of things are bodies many and minute, which could, in the same order which they had before, and with the figure of their form preserved, be thrown abroad, and much more swiftly too, being less subject to impediments, as few in number and placed along the front. For truly many things we see discharge their stuff at large, not only from their cores, deep set within, as we have said above, but from their surfaces at times no less, their very colours too, and commonly the awnings, saffron, red and dusky blue, stretched overhead in mighty theatres, upon their poles and cross beams fluttering, have such an action quite, for there they die, and make to undulate with their every hue the circled throng below, and all the stage, and rich attire in the patrician seats, and ever the more the theatre's dark walls around them shut, the more all things within laugh in the bright suffusion of strange glints, the daylight being withdrawn. And therefore, since the canvas hangings thus discharge their dye from off their surface, things in general must likewise their tenuous effigies discharge, because in either case they are oft thrown from off the surface. So there are indeed such certain prints and vestiges of forms, which flit around, of subtlest texture made invisible, when separate, each and one. Again, all odor, smoke, and heat, and such, streams out of things diffusedly, because, whilst coming from the deeps of body forth, and rising out, along their bending path, they're torn asunder, nor have gateways straight, wherethrough to mass themselves and struggle abroad. But contrariwise, when such a tenuous film of outside colour is thrown off, there's naught can rend it, since 'tis placed along the front, ready to hand. Lastly, those images which to our eyes in mirrors do appear in water, or in any shining surface, must be, since furnished with like look of things, fashioned from images of things sent out. There are, then, tenuous effigies of forms like unto them, which no one can divine, when taken singly, which do yet give back, when by continued and recurrent discharge expelled, a picture from the mirror's plane. Nor otherwise, it seems, can they be kept so well conserved that thus be given back figures so like each object. Now then, learn how tenuous is the nature of an image. And in the first place, since primordials be so far beneath our senses, and much less even than those objects which begin to grow too small for eyes to note, learn now in few how nice are the beginnings of all things. That this, too, I may yet confirm in proof. First, living creatures are sometimes so small that even their third part can nowise be seen. Judge, then, the size of any inward organ. What of their sphere heart, their eyes, their limbs. The skeleton, how tiny thus they are! And what besides of those first particles? Whence soul and mind must fashioned be, ceased not. How nice and how minute! Besides, whatever exhales from out its body a sharp smell, the nauseous absinthe, or the panacea, strong southern wood, or bitter centauri. If never so lightly with thy fingers twain, perchance thou touch a one of them, then why not rather know that images flit hither and thither, many, in many modes, bodiless and invisible? But lest haply thou holdest that those images which come from objects are the soul that flit. Others indeed there be of own accord, begot, self-formed in earth's airy skies, which, moulded to innumerable shapes, are borne aloft, and, fluid as they are, cease not to change appearance and to turn into new outlines of all sorts of forms, as we behold the clouds grow thick on high, and smirch the serene vision of the world, stroking the air with motions. For oft are seen the giants' faces flying far along, and trailing a spread of shadow, and at times the mighty mountains and mountain-sundered rocks, going before and crossing on the sun, whereafter a monstrous beast dragging a mane, and leading in the other thunderheads. Now hear how easy and how swift they be, engendered, and perpetually flow off from things and gliding pass away. For ever every outside streams away from off all objects, since discharge they may. And when this outside reaches other things, as chiefly glass, it passes through, but where it reaches the rough rocks or stuff of wood, there 'tis so rent that it cannot give back an image. But when gleaming objects dense, as chiefly mirrors, have been set before it, nothing of this sort happens. For it can't go, as through glass, nor yet be rent its safety, by virtue of that smoothness, being sure. 'Tis therefore that from them the images stream back to us, and how so suddenly. Thou place, at any instant, anything before a mirror, there an image shows, proving that ever from a body's surface flow off thin textures and thin shapes of things. Thus many images in little time are gendered, so their origin is named rightly a speedy. And even as the sun must send below, in little time, to earth, so many beams to keep all things so full of light incessant, thus, on grounds the same, from things there must be born, in many modes, to every quarter round, upon the moment, the many images of things, because unto whatever face of things we turn, the mirror, things of form and hue the same, respond. Besides, though but a moment since, serenest was the weather of the sky, so fiercely sudden is it foully thick, that ye might think that round about all murk had parted forth from Acheron and filled the mighty vaults of sky so grievously, as gathers thus the storm cloud's gruesome night. Do faces of black horror hang on high, of which how small a part an image is, there's none to tell or reckon out in words. Now come, with what swift motion they are borne, these images, and what the speed assigned to them across the breezes swimming on, so that o'er lengths of space a little hour alone is wasted, toward whatever region each with its divers impulse tensile tell, in verses sweeter than they many are, even as the swan's slight note is better far than that dispersed clamour of the cranes among the south wind's airy clouds. And first, one oft may see that objects which are light and made of tiny bodies are the swift, in which class is the sun's light and his heat, since made from small primordial elements, which, as it were, are forward knocked along, and through the interspaces of the air, to pass delay not, urged by blows behind. For light by light is instantly supplied, and gleam by following gleam is spurred and driven. Thus likewise must the images have power, through unimaginable space to speed, within a point of time, first, since a cause exceeding small there is, which at their back far forward drives them and propels, where, too, they're carried with such winged lightness on. And, secondly, since furnished, when sent off, with texture of such rareness that they can, through objects whatsoever penetrate, and ooze, as 'twere, through intervening air. Besides, if those fine particles of things, which from so deep within are sent abroad, as light and heat of sun, are seen to glide, and spread themselves through all the space of heaven, upon one instant of the day, and fly o'er sea and lands and flood the heaven, what then? Of those which on the outside stand prepared, when they're hurled off with not a thing to check their going out? Dost thou not see indeed how swifter and how farther must they go, and speed through manifold the length of space, in time the same that from the sun the rays o'er spread the heaven? This also seems to be example chief and true with what swift speed the images of things are borne about, that soon as ever under open skies is spread the shining water, all at once. If stars be out in heaven, up gleam from earth, serene and radiant in the water there, the constellations of the universe. Now seest thou not in what a point of time an image from the shores of ether falls unto the shores of earth? Wherefore, again, and yet again, 'tis needful to confess, with wondrous the senses and mental pictures, bodies that strike the eyes, a waking sight. From certain things flow odors evermore, as cold from rivers, heat from sun, and spray from waves of ocean, eater out of walls, around the coasts, nor ever cease to flit. The varied voices, sounds afar through the air. Then too there comes into the mouth at times the wet of a salt taste, when by the sea we roam about, and so, whenever we watch the wormwort being mixed, its bitter stings, to such degree from all things is each thing borne streaming along, and sent about to every region round, and nature grants nor rest nor respite of the onward flow, since 'tis incessantly we feeling have, and all the time are suffered to descry and smell all things at hand, and hear them sound. Besides, since shape examined by our hands within the dark is known to be the same as that by eyes perceived within the light and lustrous day, both touch and sight must be by one like cause aroused. So, if we test a square and get its stimulus on us within the dark, within the light, what square can fall upon our sight, except a square that images the things? Wherefore it seems the source of seeing is in images. Nor without these can anything be viewed. Now these same films I name are borne about, and tossed and scattered into regions all. But since we do perceive alone through eyes, it follows hence that whither so we turn our sight, all things do strike against it there, with form and hue. And just how far from us each thing may be away, the image yields to us the power to see and chance to tell. For when 'tis sent, at once it shoves ahead, and drives along the air that's in the space betwixt it and our eyes. And thus this air all glides through our eyeballs, and, as 'twere, brushes through our pupils and thus wise passes across. Therefore it comes we see how far from us each thing may be away, and the more air there be that's driven before, and to the longer be the brushing breeze against our eyes, the farther off removed each thing is seen to be. Forsooth, this work with mightily swift order all goes on, so that upon one instant we may see what kind the object and how far away. Nor over marvellous must this be deemed in these affairs that, though the films which strike upon the eyes cannot be singly seen, the things themselves may be perceived. For thus, when the wind beats upon us stroke by stroke, and when the sharp cold streams, 'tis not our wont to feel each private particle of wind, or of that cold, but rather all at once. And so we see how blows affect our body, as if one thing were beating on the same, and giving us the feel of its own body outside of us. Again, whenever we thump with fingertip upon a stone, we touch but the rock's surface and the outer hue, nor feel that hue by contact, rather feel the very hardness deep within the rock. Now come, and why beyond a looking glass an image may be seen, perceive. For seen it smoothly is, removed far within, 'tis the same sort as objects peered upon outside in their true shape. Whenever a door yields through itself an open peering place, and lets us see so many things outside, beyond the house, also that sight is made by a twofold twin air. For first is seen the air inside the doorposts, next the doors, the twain to left and right, and afterwards a light beyond comes brushing through our eyes. Then other air, then objects peered upon outside in their true shape. And thus, when first the image of the glass projects itself, as to our gaze it comes, it shoves ahead, and drives along the air that's in the space betwixt it and our eyes, and brings to pass that we perceive the air ere yet the glass. But when we've also seen the glass itself, forthwith that image which from us is born reaches the glass, and there thrown back again, comes back unto our eyes, and driving rolls ahead of itself another air, that then 'tis this we see before itself, and thus it looks so far removed behind the glass. Wherefore again, there's naught for wonder in those which render from the mirror's plane a vision back, since each thing comes to pass by means of the two airs. Now, in the glass, the right part of our members is observed upon the left, because, when comes the image hitting against the level of the glass, 'tis not returned unshifted, but forced off. backwards in line direct and not oblique. Exactly as whoso his plaster mask should dash, before 'twere dry, on post or beam. And it should straightway keep, at clinging there. Its shape, reversed, facing him who threw. And so remold the features it gives back. It comes that now the right eye is the left. The left the right. An image too may be. From mirror into mirror handed on. Until of idle films even 5 or 6 have thus been gendered. For whatever things shall hide back yonder in the house, the same, however far removed in twisting ways, may still be all brought forth through bending paths, and by these several mirrors seen to be within the house, since nature so compels all things to be borne backward and spring off at equal angles from all other things. To such degree the image gleams across from mirror unto mirror, where 'twas left. It comes to be the right, and then again returns and changes round unto the left. Again, those little sides of mirrors curved, proportionate to the bulge of our own flank, send back to us their idols with the right upon the right, and this is so because either the image is passed on along from mirror unto mirror, and thereafter, when twice dashed off, flies back unto ourselves, or else the image wheels itself around when once unto the mirror it has come, since the curved surface teaches it to turn to us ward. Further, thou mightest well believe that these film idols step along with us, and set their feet in unison with ours, and imitate our carriage, since from that part of a mirror whence thou hast withdrawn, straightway no images can be returned. Further, our eyeballs tend to flee the bright, and shun to gaze thereon, the sun even blinds, if thou goest on to strain them unto him, because his strength is mighty, and the films heavily downward from on high are borne through the pure ether and the viewless winds, and strike the eyes, disordering their joints. So piecing lustre often burns the eyes, because it holds many seeds of fire, which, working into eyes, engender pain. Again, whatever jaundiced people view becomes one yellow, since from out their bodies flow many seeds one yellow forth to meet the films of things, and many too are mixed within their eye, which by contagion paint all things with shallowness. Again, we view from dark recesses things that stand in light, because, when first has entered and possessed the open eyes this nearer darkling air, swiftly the shining air and luminous followeth in, which purges then the eyes, and scatters asunder of that other air the sable shadows, for in large degrees this air is nimbler, nicer, and more strong. And soon as ever it has filled and opened with light the pathways of the eyes, which before black air had blocked, there follow straightway those films of things outstanding in the light, provoking vision what we cannot do from out the light with objects in the dark, because that denser darkling air behind followeth in, and fills each aperture, and thus blockades the pathways of the eyes, that there no images of any things can be thrown in and agitate the eyes. And when from far away we do behold the squared towers of a city, oft rounded they seem, on this account because each distant angle is perceived obtuse, or rather it is not perceived at all, and perishes its blow nor to our gaze arrives its stroke, since through such length of air are borne along the idols that the air makes blunt the idol of the angle's point, by numerous colliding. When thus wise, the angles of the tower each and all have quite escaped the sense, the stones appear as rubbed and rounded on a turner's wheel, yet not like objects near and truly round, but with a semblance to them, shadowy. Likewise, our shadow in the sun appears to move along and follow our own steps, and imitate our carriage. If thou thinkest air that is thus bereft of light can walk, following the gait and motion of mankind, for what we use to name a shadow, sure, is naught but air deprived of light. No marvel, because the earth from spot to spot is reft progressively of light of sun, whenever in moving round we get within its way, while any spot of earth by us abandoned is filled with light again. On this account, it comes to pass that what was body's shadow seems still the same to follow after us in one straight course, since evermore pour in new lights of rays, and perish then the old, just like the wool that's drawn into the flame. Therefore the earth is easily spoiled of light, and easily refilled, and from herself washes the black shadows quite away. And yet in this we don't at all concede that eyes be cheated, for their task it is to note in whatsoever place be light, in what be shadow, whether or no the gleams be still the same, and whether the shadow which just now was here is that one passing thither, or whether the facts be what we said above. 'Tis after all the reasoning of mind that must decide, nor can our eyeballs know the nature of reality. And so, attach thou not this fault of mind to eyes, nor lightly think our senses everywhere are tottering. The ship in which we sail is borne along, although it seems to stand. The ship that bides in roadstead is supposed there to be passing by, and hills and fields seem fleeing fast astern, past which we urge the ship and fly under the bellying sails. The stars, each one, do seem to pause, affixed to the ethereal caverns, though they all forever are in motion, rising out, and thence revisiting their far descents, when they have measured with their bodies bright the span of heaven. And likewise sun and moon seem biding in a roadstead, objects which, as plain fact proves, are really borne along between two mountains far away aloft. From midst the whirl of waters open lies a gaping exit for the fleet, and yet they seem conjoined in a single isle, when buoys themselves have stopped their spinning round. The halls still seem to whirl and posts to reel, until they now must almost think the roofs threaten to ruin down upon their heads. And now, when nature begins to lift on high the sun's red splendor and the tremulous fires, and raise him o'er the mountain tops, those mountains o'er which he seemeth then to thee to be, his glowing self hard by tinging them with his own fire, are yet away from us scarcely 2,000 arrow shots, indeed oft scarce 500 courses of a dart. Although between those mountains and the sun lie the huge plains of ocean spread beneath the vast shores of ether, and intervene 1,000 lands, possessed by many a folk, and generations of wild beasts. Again, a pool of water of but a finger's depth, which lies between the stones along the pave, offers a vision downward into earth, as far as from the earth o'er spread on high, the gulfs of heaven, that thus thou seemest to view. Clouds down below and heavenly bodies plunged wondrously in heaven under earth. Then too, when in the middle of the stream sticks fast our dashing horse, and down we gaze into the river's rapid waves, some force seems then to bear the body of the horse, though standing still, reversely from his course, and swiftly push upstream. And wheresoever we cast our eyes across, all objects seem thus to be onward borne and flow along, in the same way as we. A portico, albeit it stands well propped from end to end, on equal columns, parallel and big, contracts by stages in a narrow cone, when from one end the long hole is seen, until, conjoining ceiling with the floor, and the whole right side with the left, it draws together to a cone's nivulous point. To sailors on the main the sun he seems from out the waves to rise, and in the waves to set and bury his light, because indeed they gaze on naught but water and the sky. Again, to gazers ignorant of the sea, vessels in port seem, as with broken poops, to lean upon the water, quite agog for any portion of the oars that's raised above the briny spray is straight, and straight the rudders from above. But other parts, those sunk, immersed below the water line, seem broken all and bended and inclined, sloping to upwards, and turned back to float almost atop the water. And when the winds carry the scattered drifts along the sky in the night time, then seem to glide along the radiant constellations gainst the clouds, and there on high to take far other course from that whereon in truth they're born. And then, if haply our hand be set beneath one eye, and press below thereon, then to our gaze each object which we gaze on seems to be by some sensation twain, then twain the lights of lampions burgeoning in flowers of flame, and twain the furniture in all the house, twofold the visages of fellow men, and twain their bodies. And again, when sleep has bound our members down in slumber soft, and all the body lies in deep repose, yet then we seem to self to be awake, and move our members, and in night's blind gloom we think to mark the daylight and the sun, and, shut within a room, yet still we seem to change our skies, our oceans, rivers, hills, to cross the plains afoot, and hear new sounds, though still the austere silence of the night abides around us, and to speak replies, though voiceless. Other cases of the sort, wondrously many do we see, which all seek, so to say, to injure faith and sense. In vain, because the largest part of these deceives through mere opinions of the mind, which we do at ourselves, feigning to see what by the senses are not seen at all. For naught is harder than to separate plain facts from dubious, which the mind forthwith adds by itself. Again, if one suppose that naught is known, he knows not whether this itself is able to be known, since he confesses not to know. Therefore with him I waive discussion who has set his head even where his feet should be. But let me grant that this he knows. I question whence he knows what 'tis to know and not to know in turn, and what created concept of the truth, and what device has proved the dubious to differ from the certain, since in things he's heretofore seen not of true. Thou wilt find that from the senses first hath been create concept of truth, nor can the senses be rebutted. For criterion must be found worthy of greater trust, which shall defeat through own authority the false by true. What, then these our senses must there be worthy a greater trust? Shall reason, sprung from some false sense, prevail to contradict those senses, sprung as reason wholly is from out the senses? For lest these be true, all reason also then is falsified. Or shall the ears have power to blame the eyes? Or yet the touch the ears? Again, shall taste accuse this touch, or shall the nose confute, or eyes defeat it? Methinks not so it is. For unto each has been divided off its function quite apart, its power to each. And thus we're still constrained to perceive the soft, the cold, the hot apart, all divers hues and whatso things there be, conjoined with hues. Likewise the tasting tongue has its own power apart, and smells apart, and sounds apart are known. And thus it is that no one sense can ever convict another, nor shall one sense have power to blame itself, because it always must be deemed the same, worthy of equal trust. And therefore what at any time unto these senses showed the same is true. And if the reason be unable to unravel us the cause, why objects, which at hand were square, afar seemed rounded, yet it more avails us, lacking the reason, to pretend a cause for each configuration, than to let from out our hands escape the obvious things, and injure primal faith in sense, and wreck all those foundations upon which do rest our life and safety. For not only reason would topple down, but even our very life would straightway collapse, unless we dared to trust our senses and to keep away from headlong heights and places to be shunned of a like peril, and to seek with speed their opposites. Again, as in a building, if the first plumb line be askew, and if the square deceiving swerve from lines exact, and if the level waver but the least in any part, the whole construction then must turn out faulty, shelving and askew, leaning to back and front, incongruous, that now some portions seem about to fall, and falls the whole ere long, betrayed indeed by first deceiving estimates. So too thy calculations in affairs of life must be askew and false, if sprung for thee from senses false. So all that troop of words marshalled against the senses is quite vain, and now remains to demonstrate with ease how other senses each their things perceive. Firstly, a sound in every voice is heard, when, getting into ears, they strike the sense with their own body. For confess we must even voice and sound to be corporeal, because they're able on the sense to strike Besides, voice often scrapes against the throat, and screams in going out do make more rough the windpipe naturally enough, methinks. When, through the narrow exit rising up, in larger throng, these primal germs of voice have thus begun to issue forth. In sooth, also the door of the mouth is scraped against by air blown outward from distended cheeks. And thus no doubt there is, that voice and words consist of elements corporeal, with power to pain. Nor art thou unaware, likewise, how much of bodies taken away, how much from very thews and powers of men, may be withdrawn by steady talk, prolonged, even from the rising splendor of the morn, to shadows of black evening. Above all, if tea be outpoured with most exceeding shouts, therefore the voice must be corporeal, since the long talker loses from his frame a part. Moreover, roughness in the sound comes from the roughness in the primal germs, as a smooth sound from smooth ones is create. Nor have these elements a form the same when the trump rumbles with a hollow roar, as when barbaric bare Cynthian pipe buzzes with raucous boomings, or when swans, by night from icy shores of Helicon, with wailing voices raise their liquid dirge. Thus, when from deep within our frame we force these voices, and at mouth expel them forth, the mobile tongue, artificer of words, makes them articulate, and to the lips, by their formations share in shaping them. Hence, when the space is short from starting point to where that voice arrives, the very words must too be plainly heard, distinctly marked. For then the voice conserves its own formation, conserves its shape. But if the space between be longer than is fit, the words must be through the much air confounded, and the voice disordered in its flight across the winds. And so it haps, that thou canst sound perceive, yet not determine what the words may mean. To such degree confounded and encumbered, the voice approaches us. Again, one word sent from the crier's mouth may rouse all ears among the populace, and thus one voice scatters asunder into many voices, since it divides itself for separate ears, imprinting form of word in a clear tone. But whatso part of voices fails to hit the ears themselves perishes, borne beyond, idly diffused among the winds. A part, beating on solid porticos, tossed back, returns a sound, and sometimes mocks the ear with a mere phantom of a word. When this thou well hast noted, thou canst render count unto thyself and others why it is along the lonely places that the rocks give back like shapes of words in order like. When search we after comrades wandering among the shady mountains, and aloud call unto them, the scattered. I have seen spots that gave back even voices 6 or 7. For one thrown forth, for so the very hills, dashing them back against the hills, kept on with their reverberations. And these spots the neighbouring countryside doth feign to be haunts of the goat-foot satyrs and the nymphs, and tells ye there be fauns, by whose night noise and antic revels yonder they declare the voiceless silences are broken oft, and tones of strings are made and wailings sweet, which the pipe, beat by players' fingertips, pours out, and far and wide the farmer race begins to hear, when, shaking the garments of pine upon his half-beast head, God Pan, with puckered lip oft runneth o'er and o'er the open reeds, lest flute should cease to pour the woodland music. Other prodigies and wonders of this ilk they love to tell, lest they be thought to dwell in lonely spots, and even by gods deserted. This is why they boast of marvels in their story-telling, or by some other reason are led on, greedy, as all mankind hath ever been, to prattle fables into ears. Again, one need not wonder how it comes about that through those places, through which eyes cannot view objects manifest, sounds yet may pass and assail the ears. For often we observe people conversing, though the doors be closed. No marvel either, since all voice unharmed can win through bended apertures of things, while idle films decline to fore they are rent, unless along straight apertures they swim, like those in glass, through which all images do fly across. And yet this voice itself, in passing through shut chambers of a house, is dulled, and in a jumble enters ears. And sound we seem to hear far more than words. Moreover, a voice is into all directions divided up, since off from one another new voices are engendered, when one voice hath once leapt forth, outstarting into many, as oft a spark of fire is wont to sprinkle itself into its several fires. And so voices do fill those places hid behind, which all are in a hubbub round about, astir with sound. But idle films do tend, as once sent forth, in straight directions all, wherefore one can inside a wall see naught, yet catch the voices from beyond the same, nor tongue and palate, whereby we flavor feel present more problems for more work of thought. Firstly, we feel a flavor in the mouth, when forth we squeeze it, in chewing up our food, as any one perchance begins to squeeze with hand and dry a sponge with water soaked. Next, all which forth we squeeze is spread about along the pores and intertwined paths of the loose textured tongue. And so, when smooth the bodies of the oozy flavor, then delightfully they touch, delightfully they treat all spots around the wet and trickling enclosures of the tongue, and contrariwise they sting and pain the sense with their assault, according as with roughness they're supplied. Next, only up to palate is the pleasure coming from flavor, for in truth when down th's plunged along the throat, no pleasure is, whilst into all the frame it spreads around. Nor aught it matters with what food is fed the body, if only what thou take thou canst distribute well digested to the frame, and keep the stomach in a moist career. Now, how it is we see some food for some, others for others, I will unfold, or wherefore what to some is foul and bitter, yet the same to others can seem delectable to eat. Why here so great the distance and the difference is, that what is food to one to some becomes fierce poison, as a certain snake there is, which, touched by spittle of a man, will waste and end itself by gnawing up its coil. Again, fierce poison is the hellebore to us, but puts the fat on goats and quails. That thou mayst know by what devices this is brought about, in chief thou must recall what we have said before, that seeds are kept commixed in things in divers modes. Again, as all the breathing creatures which take food are outwardly unlike, an outer cut and contour of their members bounds them round, each differing kind by kind, they thus consist of seeds of varying shape. And furthermore, since seeds do differ, divers too must be the interstices and paths, which we do call the apertures, in all the members, even in mouth and palate too. Thus some must be more small or yet more large, three-cornered some, and others squared, and many others round, and certain of them many-angled too, in many modes. For, as the combination and motion of their divers shapes demand, the shapes of apertures must be diverse, and paths must vary according to their walls that bound them. Hence when what is sweet to some becomes to others bitter, for him to whom 'tis sweet, the smoothest particles must needs have entered caressingly the palate's pores, and, contrariwise, with those to whom that sweet is sour within the mouth, beyond a doubt, the rough and barbed particles have got into the narrows of the apertures. Now easy it is from these affairs to know whatever, indeed, we are abundant bile is stricken with fever, or in other wise